India is the world's largest democracy, and the country is scheduled to hold at least 4 state elections before the general elections scheduled for May 2019. In 2018 alone, there were 4 state elections held till May, and in 2017, there were 7 elections, including the demographically important one for Uttar Pradesh state. During the general election, at least 1 crore people are involved in the election process, and while this is generally regarded as a grossly understated figure, it provides perspective assessment of the number of man-hours spent on elections. Other disruptions during electoral procedures include disruption from campaigning, deployment of security staff for related gatherings, and even diversion of transport resources. One of the probable solutions to combat this has been calls for uniform election dates in the country, but there have been dissenting voices against them. In this episode, we look at the potential disruptions and implications of the electoral cycle in India and how the Indian economy and the corporate sector should factor elections in their operational considerations.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report, and in this episode we are looking at the election-related risks to Indian society and to the Indian economy, particularly because in this year itself we are expecting at least 4 more major elections before India finally decides to go for the next round of general elections in 2019. When exactly will be defined much later. But what really strikes out as important is that each elections at the state level have 2 consistently common factors. One is that they are massive exercises of the state machinery leading to huge resources, manpower and money being deployed to achieve election results. And secondly, many disruptive events could follow as part of an exercise to divert attention from key areas of debate and attention during the election. And we have 2 experts who both understand the whole disruptive process, and one particularly, Dr. Vikram Singh, former DGP of UP Police, has had hands-on experience in dealing with the election process and the state machinery and politicians. So, Dr. Singh sir, I'll come to you after introducing my other guest, who is Gary Singh. Gary Singh, who comes regularly on our show, is president of IRIS, and a man who's recognized across the corporate sector as a man with considerable experience in understanding the phenomena of risk to society and to the economy. But Dr. Singh, my first question to you is, so what are these disruptive patterns that you see that are becoming common to all elections? And just draw a little more to it to say that, these kind of rioting which takes place on one pretext or another, whether it is a film which is named incorrectly or whether it is about a particular community which is getting more attention and favor by the center, all leads to massive damage to the economy and of course to human lives. Why? Is this something that was always there, or is this something which is new now and is a phenomenon that is there to stay?
Mr. Raza, with my hands-on experience, as you very rightly said, for the last 40 years, I have seen elections and handled them very, very closely. I don't say that these things were not there 40 years ago, but in a very subtle manner. Today in the gross manner, because the stakes are so high and the fight is so intense that no holds barred. What has happened in West Bengal is an indication of the fact that how bitterly fought, how really well fought these battles are, and no holds barred, as I said when I reiterate that money and muscle are the words used by the Election Commission. Therefore, anything that pulverizes and can be a potential advantage, therefore, so be it. I will resort to that gimmick, whether it's legal, extra legal or illegal. And unfortunately, the free use of money beyond the legitimate and permissible limits, as you would see, the recoveries made in West Bengal and Karnataka, if they are any indications, I would say things are going from bad to worse day by day.
Not a very happy note to begin on, but Gary, you see, look at it, the Karnataka elections, for example, saw about 50% of the state's transport fleet being garnered and reserved for election duties. Likewise, whether it is constant television coverage of election news or whether it's other buns and other alarms that are announced by people, life comes to a virtual standstill. Karnataka, as we know, is a state where many Western countries have their investment in and their eyes in, the IT capital and whatever else. And so what do security managers need to really plan on when faced with elections? Because there would be some constants they should build into their standard operating procedure.
Right. Well, allow me to take things maybe a year back before the election time, because the challenge of correct governance and up to an extent policy paralysis really starts peaking from there onwards. As everybody in India counts that, oh my God, this is going to be the last final run to the election, all the policies that will come will be populist in nature. Well, I'm still waiting for a day when the policies are really made for the country, but obviously in the last 1 year they become more populist and they become more focused towards the vote bank. Not only the challenge of those policies, but even trust on those policies. For example, if an international investment which has to come in, anything that has been created as a new policy or a platform within last 1 year, the international brands do not come and invest because they are not very sure the new government that will come up will still hold this, because opposition is protesting it. If they end up winning, what's the situation? So that is on the investment front, primarily a hit which starts almost a year back. Then coming to the challenges which we often these days witness during the election or just before the election, the challenges of complete machinery, whether administrative or law enforcement, busy handling the election, definitely leaves the corporate very naked and unprotected in terms of anything that they're facing. And it's a genuine problem. They don't have time. They have specific instruction that you need to do this now. Whereas the risk to the corporate during those run to the elections are going up and up. So earlier we used to talk about there is a huge amount of violence, there is a regular interference of unions through political parties indirectly in the overall production area, what the labor union will do. We were regularly talking about huge amount of money and liquor being herded to one place to another. But something new which we have seen of late, even there is a corporate extortion. These political parties do not hesitate to walk up to the corporate bodies and demand money for the elections, and including the international firms. There have been a lot of situations in the last 5-6 years. Even the CEOs of international firms have come and said, this is the first time we are facing this challenge of a political party coming and asking funding from us. What do I do about it?
So, sir, it takes me back to a question which I often raise in various social gatherings. Then what is this democracy that we keep trumpeting about? That we keep thumping our chests about, that we are the world's largest democracy? I mean, is this the democracy that we need to be proud about, that because we are holding elections with successive frequency as desired by the Election Commission, forget the money and the muscle power involved, but just by holding them, we are achieving great milestones? Forget for a moment the questioning of elections in the state of Jammu and Kashmir or some other troubled state of India, but we thought Karnataka, we thought Bengal, we thought some other states, Punjab, were the progressive states where there was the possibility of a lot of industrial growth and a lot of investment coming in, because it's the same chief ministers who keep announcing in various summits and meetings in their own state and send dignitaries abroad to go and garner investment. But who's going to come and invest if this is the mess that you are providing?
Mr. Raza, I wish I could contradict you, but the fact remains, lofty ideals and lowly conduct. If I were to summarize in just 4 words, lofty ideals and lowly conduct. Mr. Gary Singh has brought out very beautifully, extortion and leaving the corporates naked. It is a reality, and a reality that has happened only in the last 10 years. Now it has assumed a grotesque and an epidemic proportion. Nobody is spared, no corporate is spared. And during the course of elections, we have a circular, 2 circulars from the Election Commission, both numbering the same, one of 1996 and the other of 2007, giving elaborate 10-point detail what the DMs and the superintendents of police are expected to do. In spite of those precautions, in spite of those checks and balances, the fact remains that your security is scaled down. The fact remains that your transport is requisitioned supposedly for election duties. Your premises are also earmarked for election duties. The fact remains that is an exercise to twist your arm so that better extortion happens. I wish more transparency happens, more honesty happens, and elections do happen as we loftily claim that we are sending a representative to the temples of democracy. I wish that does happen.
Well, I have my own views on that, and I don't think I'd like to air it on the channel, neither do we have the time. But Gary, back to you. You brought out one very important point, which was that in all these promises that are made during elections, we're really not seeing deliverables on the ground. Look, for example, at the unemployment rate. It continues to keep getting out of control. We are now looking at a figure of 2017 and 18 of something like 406 million people who could be seen to be seriously jobless and don't have a hope in hell. So what is it that the elections are really doing to enhance our economy?
Well, one thing which I'm sure election do to enhance the economy, the employment opportunities increase. I can sit in a rally, get 200 rupees and free food. So there is a lot of labor which was otherwise used for doing productive work is not available to the industries because they're all herded in different rallies. They're attending political rallies, sitting there for a whole day, getting free food and stuff like those. So that was more like a negative remark I wanted to put in. But the reality is, every election is definitely taking us some percentage down few years back in the overall progressive country we are. And the biggest culprit here is because it is more important to satisfy their vote banks than to satisfy this country, its economy and citizens.
Well, on that note, we need to go in for a break, and we'll come back after a break to look at issues about criminalization of politics, issues related to what really are the challenges that politics presents to our corporate environment, and most importantly, is there a forecast for the future? But that after a break. Welcome back. We continue to have our two experts with us, and we're looking at the risks that elections pose to individuals and the economy. Dr. Singh, sir, criminalization of politics has been a role which has challenged investor sentiments like no other. And Gary just brought out some realities. I'm sure you know a lot more, and you'll be discreet enough not to narrate all of them. But what is the way out? Because you did mention that, there are a list of instructions from the Election Commission to the DM, to the head of police and others. But really, can the police and the DM challenge the political frontrunners, not knowing who will be their boss tomorrow?
Very well put, Mr. Raza. The 10-point instructions given by the Election Commission in 1996 says, point number 1, no license to be issued. Point number 2, recover all licensed weapons. Number 3, keep an eye on habitual offenders, history sheeters, those with a criminal record. Now, the last point that it says is that keep a watch on habitual offenders, criminal activity. But it is easier said than done. 15 years ago, the slogans that would have landed a political person in jail are just acceptable. Our tolerance level to nonsense and absolutely outrageous slogans are now acceptable. Now it is also an accepted fact that money, muscle and the mafia also interpenetrate each other in a manner that they almost become an election fabric. It is difficult to distinguish one from the other. And I don't say it is just one political party. It is difficult to find any political party that does not rely on money, muscle and this kind of a mafia power. Now the police, I don't think it is there in the police. You may have all the paramilitary forces, but they are only there for a short while. But for the police to, during the declaration of election, till the day of the counting in 60 days, I don't think any police force in the country has it in them to give a death knell to the mafia who really are at the background of any election process.
Okay, Gary, politicians have known to have spent in 2014 approximately $5 billion for their campaign exercises. That puts us second only to the US presidential polls. Firstly, it's a huge amount of money. I mean, it was the kind of money that we would have tears of gratitude to show, which came in as investment in our economy 10 or 15 years ago as foreign direct investment. But now this is the kind of money that's doing the round. Where's the money coming from?
So that's a very interesting part actually, and especially during the elections, if you pick up data and if you really read between the lines, there's a very interesting arrival of dirty investment into India every time before a major election is taking place. So while I mentioned earlier, none of the major brands invest, but that doesn't mean the investment coming down is getting lowered. There are situations when these political parties use the original channels for bringing money for doing business, and it gets pumped into the election process for running their campaigns or getting people cash for vote situation and things like those. So money is coming huge. There are international channels of creating investment channels, putting new businesses up, getting a large amount of money, and you will find soon after the election, a lot of these investment channels and a lot of these companies which get created are nowhere to be seen after that. So there is a major channel of getting the international funds, because we often talk about Hawala and other aspects. Why to risk yourself if you can really bring the official channel in? Number two, the huge amount of cash which all of a sudden goes missing, right? We were talking about this cash going missing from rest of the country, especially north, a month back because there was a major election in south. So you can imagine how nice control these political parties and people have on the overall cash movement. So when the demonetization was taking place, that, oh no, there are common people who are running the tax and all, I think the maximum amount of cash hoarding is actually done by politicians themselves. So whether it's international funding or local cash, they are the masters. So don't have to worry about it.
And there were assertions made to that effect by many other people that the demonetization itself was an exercise to clean up the coffers of political parties. But Mr. Singh, sir, you and I, at least on this show, share one thing in common, a sense of gloom about what India is sliding towards as we happily beat our drums election after elections. So what are your projections for the near future?
I wish I could have been a little more optimistic, but what has happened in the recent elections does not give me any encouragement or does not give me any reassurance whatsoever. The disappearance of cash, the conduits, the hawala, the large amounts of cash recovered, the large amount of illegitimate things that were recovered, and the number of killings in West Bengal, I don't see any rainbow in the horizon till now. I wish the Election Commission exercises its superintendence, the police and the administration are accountable only to their conscience and to the constitution and not to the manifesto of any political party.
And Gary, that Dr. Singh's assertion, and if you have something more to add to it, but equally important, is that the argument that while there is violence in political circles and politicians and political parties have been allegedly known to have used violence of sorts to further their political agenda, apparently that violent incidents in the country have been more or less static over the last few years around the elections. Now, is that a statistic that we would like to believe, or is that another spin that has been thrown up?
So, a lot of time we actually rely upon the data which is available with the police agencies in terms of FIRs filed. So if something doesn't reaches till FIR, it is not existing as a crime which has possibly taken place. And if you carefully notice, a lot of these violence incidents which are taking place during the run to the election, these are not really getting recorded in the manner. But well, we need to credit media sometime. A lot of time we only say that they are bad, but you look at the total violence reports published in media. And they're all digital media these days. The moment you do a comparative analysis, you will find the violence is going almost sometimes more than double, let's say 1 or 2 months before the election than it normally had existed. So violence going up is a fact. How it's recorded and not getting computed is a data liability we can call it as of now.
So, Dr. Singh, it's also said that elections are not just disruptive in terms of violence, in terms of transport fleets being garnered, in terms of the threat to businesses because of days off because of voting, etc., but also the number of people involved in making the election process happen. And general elections, which should happen next year, would require about 1 crore people or more to make sure that the election process goes through smoothly. Now, is that A, a fair number, or is that an understatement? And B, how many days of working man hours do we stand to lose just to have the election process going on, not just the general election, but a number of state elections year on year?
Election as an exercise is an exercise that impacts all of us, and it disrupts our normal life as nothing else does. Now the number of man hours is difficult too because nothing else happens except elections. Schools don't run, colleges don't run, teaching doesn't happen, business doesn't happen the way it should happen. The only thing that happens is number 1, rallies. Number 2, sloganeering. Number 3, rioting. Number 4, allegations and counter allegations. Normal life is disrupted in a manner that it is difficult for you and me and common citizens even to get a wink of sleep during the period. So the moment there is a notification of the general election, till the victory elections 24 hours after the declaration of results, life is absolutely not normal. And the number of man hours that you suggest, what is projected, I would say twice as much, is the loss of man hours and the normal life.
Very quick point because you've got to wind up.
So just to share and compare this to the corporate world, if I am a corporate leader or a security manager, my resources start going down to even run my normal operations. My business continuity and resiliency of operations get disturbed. My cost of doing business goes up. So if I am a corporate manager, I need to look for additional resources in the election year. I need to brush my SOPs and maybe create specific action point during election, what we'll do, how we will manage the complete security process, how we will ensure the complete movement of vehicles if I'm running in a BPO or an IT segment. So I need to look at those aspects because my business continuity will impact my resiliency of ops, and my cost of doing business in the election is going to go up.
Well, quite clearly, elections, apart from the time they take up and the energy they take up, importantly, they do impact quite considerably on our economy through the manpower, the man hours, and the many other disruptions that they bring to bear. And I wish to thank both our guests for their enlightened views, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.